Today on the channel, it's the return of the Kyle Peterson Top 5, and today we've got the top 5 most disappointing wrestling figures of all time. Welcome everyone, Kyle here, and welcome back to the channel for another Top 5 countdown, a Thursday tradition here on the channel, with the occasional Top 10 mixed in, as you guys are fully aware. If this is your first time to the channel, make sure you subscribe and hit the old notification bell. You don't want to miss when a video comes up, as we got content every single day. And of course, we've just newly launched our Patreon, so check out the link in the description below if you're interested in Patreon, as these videos are much earlier if you're a Patreon member, sometimes weeks, even months early. So check that out if you are so inclined. But today we're talking a touchy subject, and one I think we could have a lot of fun with. It's a little bit negative, of course. Anytime we're talking about the worst, it's a little negative, but it is what it is. And today we're talking about the top 5 most disappointing wrestling figures of all time for me. As I always say in these startups to these top 5 countdowns, this is my list. Put your list in the comments down below. There might be some stuff on my list you absolutely love, and you might agree with me on a lot of this stuff, and I'm sure you have some different stuff on your list as well. But I'm going to say now, there's a lot of things that have disappointed us in wrestling figures. Every single company that has made wrestling figures has disappointed us at one time or another, be it a weapon, an accessory, a look, a body type. You name it, there's been a lot of disappointment, a lot of heartache and disappointment throughout the years. But these, going all the way back to my LJN starting days through Hasbro's, Jakks, Mattel, Jazzwares, out of all these figures, and there's been tons of hot garbage. Off the top of my head, we just got a Trish Stratus that was hot garbage just recently in the Elite line. Now that's not on my list. Spoiler alert. That is just there's bumps on the road in every toy line, as we know. But these 5 I'm talking about here really did break my heart, as I was expecting so much more. I was very excited for something, and it just didn't work out for whatever reason, and we'll go into it one by one like we always do. And like I said, this is my list. Put your list in the comments down below. So without any further ado, let's kick it off at number 5. All right, we kick it off at number 5, and number 5 goes to a very recent wrestling toy line. Where do we go? Well, we go to the AEW Jazzwares line. Yes, AEW Jazzwares. And this is the only time in this countdown here we're going to talk about a whole series. And what series am I talking about? I'm sure you can guess. AEW Jazzwares Unrivaled Series 1. Talk about taking all the air out of the room. Now, things have since been corrected, thankfully. But we saw the first edition, the first Unrivaled series, and the skin tones, absolutely horrible. Way too pale on these figures. Everybody in the wave, except Brandy, suffered from this too pale disease. Talk about just utter disappointment for a whole wrestling figure community. We had such high hopes for another wrestling toy brand, a major toy brand coming to the market. It was a magical time a couple years ago. I mean, it seems like a lifetime ago, but it was, 2.5, 3 years ago, whatever it was at this point. But we were so excited for new wrestling figures, first time in the line figures, things like that. Jeremy Padower and his team that managed Jakks for all those years with the classics, the Ruthless Aggression, stuff like that, at the helm here. We thought, the world was our oyster. We didn't know what to expect, and this is what we were delivered. Unfortunately, terrible paint tones on these figures. Now, spin cycle started immediately. If you remember back, Jeremy was saying, the pictures that we got, the glamour shots were just not right. It was the sun, it was the lighting, and all this kind of stuff. Well, we all saw through that when we got these in hand, and we all, shed a couple of tears. It was like, is this what it's going to be? There was some of us out there trying to apologize and trying to justify it to ourselves. It's not that bad. Well, in hindsight, it's even worse than we thought, as we've gotten, thankfully, this corrected in future series, but these just stand out. Now, they are a little tongue-in-cheek. They are a moment in time. I do have my entire set, and thankfully, Jeremy and the Jazzwares team, they went back and they corrected the skin tones and came out with Series 1B, and much better, as you can see. You can see Cody, both versions there. The boy that likes turtles, and then the boy that likes turtles that got a tan is what that equals out to be. But man, talk about letting the air out of the room, like I said. Me personally, I said, oh my gosh, is this what we're to expect going forward? Thankfully, Jazzwares, not all companies do this, and I think Hasbro and Mattel do this more than people give them credit for, but Jeremy really took the feedback, Series 2 on, running this one back, fixing the skin tones, making all is right in the world, but talk about disappointment. When this happened, man, just really, really bad news, bad times in the wrestling figure game when this was what the first product was unleashed to us. Thankfully, all was right in the world, and it's been corrected since. Now, they still have their challenges, just like Mattel and every other ones do. But to get your foot off this way, not the best decision, I don't think. So, number 5 for me, AEW Unrivaled, Series 1. All right, next up is the number 4 slot, and number 4 comes from my favorite wrestling figure line of all time. If you were longtime viewers of the channel, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm talking about Jakks Classic Superstars. Now, I am not brainwashed. Maybe I am, but I'm not brainwashed to an extent where I say, hey, every Jakks Class Superstar is the greatest thing since sliced bread. It is not. There is a lot of misses, but there's a lot of great stuff. There's some things that are super disappointing that I'm not even going to cover here. Like I said, I could do like a top 20 on this thing. One that sticks out of my brain is the Rock and Roll Express, getting the heads wrong with the hairdos. Man, Rock and Roll Express don't ever get figures, and they messed that up. They've messed up a lot of different things in the Classic Superstars, but one that really, much like AEW Jazzwares, we talked about Series 1, well, we're going to go to Jakks Classic Superstars Series 1, and we had a little bit of that same thing going on, and who am I going to go to? We're going to Jakks Classic Superstars Series 1, Andre the Giant. Of course, Andre the Giant, one of the biggest, no pun intended, superstars of all time. A true giant, a true larger-than-life character, and it was awesome when we knew he was coming in Series 1 of Jakks Class Superstars. That is a character that needs to be in there, that kicks that line off with a bang. I love big figures. No stranger to big figures. Some of my favorite characters are bigger, larger figures. That's what I like. So I was even more excited to get Andre the Giant. Taking that back, we hadn't had an Andre the Giant figure in quite some time. It was a favorite Hasbro of mine. It was a favorite LJN of mine back in the day. So I was very happy to get more of a modern Andre the Giant finally. After many years of no Andres, man, he's back with a passion. He's back. He's here. And what happened? Well, Jakks Class Superstar Series 1 came out, and it was basically, hey, let's just reuse the Big Show body from the other Jakks lines and pop an Andre head. That's exactly what they did, and Kyle, just a knife in my heart immediately. I said, are you kidding me? I wanted this Andre the Giant so bad, and they just used this Big Show body, and it has the double strap, of course. That's what I'm getting at. It's horrible. Andre never wore a double strap like that. It's totally inaccurate. And to kick off Series 1, you're just like, ugh. And I remember at the time, Series 1 was such a strong lineup. I mean, revisit the back there. You got Ultimate Warrior, you got Undertaker, you got Shawn Michaels, Triple H, Andre, of course. You know, maybe I had rose-colored glasses on or something, and I was awfully disappointed, but I really said, oh, I can't wait for Series 2. I can't wait to get these legends. So it didn't curtail the excitement, and I guess much like the AEW, once again, it's a perfect number 5, number 4, as they do go together just with their histories and stuff. I wasn't totally down on the line. I just hoped for improvement, and for the most part, we got good improvements. Occasional hiccups like you see with Mattel and even Jazzwares today, but this was such a disgrace. And then I forgot to mention, on the back, they show Andre with the 1 singlet. So it was like, hey, let's just really rub some salt in the wounds. We'll give you the 2 strap, but on the back, it's correct. Oh, man, just heartbreak, disappointment there. Luckily, we got a lot more Andres in the Classics line that fixed this wrong, which was nice, righted the wrong. But, man, to come out of the gate swinging with this, very, very difficult, but I'm glad they did fix things throughout the years. So there it is. Number 4 for me, Jakks Class Superstar Series 1, Andre the Giant. All right, we're at the number 3 spot, and this is the halfway point, as you guys know, so make sure you put your list in the comments down below. I'd love to see what your top 5 most disappointing figures, wrestling figures, were of all time. But number 3 for me is a line we don't talk about on the channel a whole lot, but was a very important line in my childhood, in my playing days, a line that I just absolutely loved. I've talked a little bit about the times, but we haven't went in depth, and maybe that's a future video down the line. But today, number 3 comes from WCW Galoob line. Yes, the early 90s staple Galoob line. Many, many hours of young Kyle watching WCW Saturday Night and the Power Hour and stuff like that, sitting on the floor playing with his Galoobs, playing with his Hasbros, occasionally even crossing them over, and we'll talk more about that later. But number 3 for me was one that I was very disappointed in. Who am I talking about? I'm talking about Ron Simmons of Doom at the time. Ron Simmons, WCW star, of course. later into the WWE as Farouk, the Nation, the APA. You guys know Ron Simmons' history, but I was a big Ron Simmons fan all the way back in his WCW days. Now, it was funny, Doom came aboard, and I was just a young little kid, and I didn't know it was Butch Reed and Ron Simmons. A lot of people did, but little kids like Kyle out there didn't know. So I was all in on Doom. These big, jacked up dudes that had masks on, I was all for it. With their matches against the Steiners, the Horsemen. Those matches against the Horsemen, some of my favorite WCW matches of all time. Absolutely loved those. So Ron Simmons, I was excited for a Ron Simmons figure. And I have to say, he is the most disappointing Galoob of all time. I love the pose with the elbow. The big elbow going on here. He can drop an elbow. He can hit people. He can do stuff. But to get this arm attached to his body like this, just absolute insanity. What are you doing? These are for kids to play with. He was basically unplayable. This arm was a waste of time. You could do a shoulder tackle with him, but nothing else. If they could have just had that arm out to the side or up or the double by, something. But it's basically like he is a one-armed figure. So I was so disappointed with this one from the get-go. Now, this one was fairly easy to find on the single card, but his tag team partner, the Tale of Two Galoobs, and I got Butch Reed right here. Butch Reed, the other member of Doom. Both these guys in their sweatpants, and that's a story for another day, too. But this Butch Reed is possibly one of the best playability Galoobs of all time. So you have the worst to possibly the best one as far as this Butch Reed. His arms like this, the fists going on. You could do so many different moves with him where Ron Simmons was so limited. And then Ron Simmons, of course, went on from Doom to beat Vader. I couldn't believe it. I was rooting on Ron Simmons against Vader. I was so excited when he won the WCW title. And I just never had a good player Ron Simmons as a childhood. It was really smoke and mirrors, had to pretend. Very, very disappointing. And like I said, Butch Reed, the exact opposite. So sometimes I'd play along and I would just pretend Butch Reed was in the Ron Simmons. I wouldn't say this is Ron Simmons, but I would have Butch Reed do the things Ron Simmons was doing on TV when I was playing as a kid, just because I like this figure so much more. But very, very disappointing for the Galoob days. I just wish they could have ran that back. I don't know whose idea this one was, as basically this is just a statue. This is not something you play with. I'm getting half hot about it, talking about it right now. It's just bringing up old memories. Bringing up old memories where I was just so disappointed. But I had to have Ron Simmons, of course, in my collection at that time. So there it is. The number 3 spot, WCW Galoob, Ron Simmons. All right, we're at the number 2 spot, and this stuff's all kind of coming together here. And I talked about Ron Simmons in the last one being so disappointed, but I still had to have it. Now, this was a little bit later in my playing days, collecting days, but when you go to my earliest wrestling figure days, we're going all the way back to the LJNs. I love the LJNs. I know some people say, oh, they're dog toys, whatever, but if you were there, you know how fun the LJNs were. They had a lot of playability, and you didn't know all the articulation, stuff like that. It was awesome. I love the LJNs. I'll take that to my grave. I absolutely loved it. But there was one LJN I absolutely hated. And I had the opportunity to purchase this. Now, Kyle is one that would never turn down a toy. Never turn down a toy. And this is one I said, no, you know what? I don't want it. And what are we doing? We're going all the way back to the LJN Black Card series. I was one of the fortunate ones. Got him out of a magazine for my birthday. My dad, we went through. We ordered every single one except one. I said, no, don't want it. And, you know, my dad's like, well, that's only one. You don't want it? Nope, don't want anything to do with it. I didn't want it. And this was a character I really liked. He was in a hot feud with my all-time favorite, the Ultimate Warrior. You probably know who I'm talking about. I'm talking about Ravishing Rick Rude. Yes, Rick Rude, one of my all-time favorites. I actually even prefer his WCW stuff with the Dangerous Alliance. Love Rick Rude. Loved Rick Rude for years. But even young Kyle knew, at 7 years old or whatever I was at the time, that this had no part in my playing days, my toy collections. Rick Rude, a cool guy, great on TV, but absolutely horrendous figure. I was just blown away how bad this was, even at that young age. You're a kid, you'll take anything, but I saw the pictures of this. I said, no, what am I even going to do with this? I can't even play with this. There's zero playability with this Rick Rude. He could do kind of an Orange Cassidy-esque drop kick, maybe? I don't know, but he's got the Orange Cassidy position here, but there's nothing you could do with it. Just, I don't know who came up with this idea to make him like this, but they should be cursed and out of the toy industry forever. As this was so disappointing because, like I said, Ultimate Warrior Rick Rude was one of the hottest feuds over the Intercontinental title in my childhood. Then they had the world title match. I'll never forget SummerSlam, being so excited for that SummerSlam cage match, but at the same time dreading it because I knew the next day was the first day of school and I wanted my summer to go on forever. And to get Rick Rude like this, it just works me over to this day. I'm getting half hot. My blood pressure's sky high right now. But man, did they ever mess this one up. If there was ever an LJN that needed to be ran back, Rick Rude would be the one. Just absolutely disappointing for a kid in the 80s that loved Rick Rude. Just god-awful. And I have to think this is, if you're of my age bracket, I have to think this is in your top 5 list. I don't know how it couldn't be. But there it is. That's Rick Rude coming at number 2. If you think this is bad, I'm going to get even hotter when we get into number 1. So we got to talk the number 1 most disappointing wrestling figure of all time. All right, here it is. We've come to the number 1 most disappointing wrestling figure of all time as voted by me. I'm going to ask you guys again, make sure you put your list in the comments down below. Put them in order. That's the fun. That's the challenge. And then, of course, make sure you like this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit the old notification bell. Every single Thursday on the channel, we're doing a countdown of something, be it a toy line, a character, most disappointing wrestling figures, favorite wrestling figures, things like that every single Thursday. And then every time we hit 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, we're going to do some of the heavy hitters out there, and we're going to do a top 10 countdown. And it looks like we're either going to do Jeff Hardy or Rey Mysterio, most likely in a couple of weeks, so stay tuned for that. Still trying to decide which one. As you guys know, I've recently launched a Patreon site. Patreon top tier members get to help vote on that, and right now those guys, they are in a dead heat. We're tied with Ray and we're tied with Jeff. We need somebody to break the tie. I might have to end up doing that with a coin flip. We'll see how that shakes out, but I am recently on Patreon. Check it out, link in the description below. All kinds of videos early, including these top 10s. You can get these things sometimes weeks, months in advance, depending on the video. So a lot of fun over on Patreon, a lot of exclusive content. So check it out, support the old channel. And then you can also support the channel by ProWrestlingTees.com, search Kyle Peterson. And then, of course, you can find me on social media at SirPaul64 on Twitter, Instagram, _Kyle_Peterson. So without further ado, let's get down to number 1, and let's really break Kyle's heart all over again. Trying to keep the blood pressure down. It's just this one got me so fired up as a kid, now I'm getting fired up just thinking about talking about it again. Now, this came out from the old Hasbro days. Hasbro WWF figures, man, they were great. I always say I was very lucky in my wrestling figure fandom, and I'm sure some of you guys think the same way about your lines if you're younger than me, even older than me. But I was one of those kids that was right in knee-deep into the LJNs and knee-deep into the Hasbros. I was in both of those. Those were my prime playing days with the Galoobs thrown in, of course. I was a little too young, too young for the Remcos, and then I was too old to really play with the Titantrons and R3s, as those were god-awful, as you guys know. You all know that. Those would have been on my top 10 list, right up probably 6, 7. I am not an R3 guy. I am not a Titantron guy, and maybe we can delve into that more down the line. I was a little bit older. You guys know how that goes. But number 1 for me comes from the Hasbro line, and this was a figure I was so excited for. I remember when this guy jumped ship from WCW to the WWF, and a lot of people were like, oh my gosh, we're going to see him versus Hogan. We're going to see this. Kyle's first instinct was, oh my gosh, we're going to get a Hasbro. We're going to get a Hasbro Ric Flair. I was so excited. I was so pumped, so jazzed, as Ric Flair and the Ultimate Warrior, Terry Funk, those are my top 3 wrestlers of all time. Even as a child, I loved those guys. I guess Terry Funk I didn't love till a little bit later. Obviously, I loved him a lot in the I Quit era, but I really came to love him into the ECW era and beyond. Then going back and finding stuff. It's not about Terry Funk. This is about the Nature Boy, Ric Flair. Coming to the WWF, gonna get a Hasbro. I loved him in WCW. I loved the Horseman. I was a rare kid that loved a lot of the heels, and Ric Flair was at the tippy top for me. I loved his Galoob figure. Yes, it could have been a little bit better, but I loved playing with his WCW Galoob. But I said, you know what? The big boys are in the WWF. We got Warrior, you got the Taker, the Hogan, the Slaughters, the Bret Harts, the Perfect. So many fun toys. Such a bigger roster. I was so excited to give Ric Flair into that roster. So I was on pins and needles. I knew it would happen. I just didn't know when. And I don't know how long after he arrived. Somebody could look that up, but I bet you it was 6 months, a year maybe after he arrived that we finally got the figure. And I was so excited. And back then, there was no internet. There was none of that. You went to the stores and you saw these things. And I remember distinctly going to my local Toys R Us and seeing Nature Boy Ric Flair, and I might as well break the news to everybody. Here he is right here. Seeing that one there, and I like to say I just fell to the floor and just passed out. And my dad had to get a handkerchief and just like wave it over my face to wake me up. And then they dumped a bucket of water on me and it still didn't work. Then they did chest compressions. And finally, little like 8, 9-year-old Kyle finally got up because he was so mad and so disappointed in this Ric Flair. Of course, I've still bought it because I needed Ric Flair in my Hasbros, But man, could they have made a worse Ric Flair for us? I mean, I don't know, maybe even making him a jumper, that might have even been worse. I don't know. It's pretty close, as I absolutely hate this one. Once again, poor Rick Rude. Has anybody ever had a worse run of figures than Rick Rude? He got the god-awful LJN we talked about. Then he got a horrible Hasbro in this same mold. It was just terrible. I don't care what you say. It was terrible. And then he's got like paint issues on his Mattel where the jacket's bleeding into his skin. He's just had a terrible run. Somebody needs to really fix up. We need an ultimate Rick Rude with all the bells and whistles that makes the world a better place, make the world whole again. But this Ric Flair, man, in the Rick Rude mold of all things, I thought it was retired forever. They never made anybody else. Then I later found out they made the 1, 2, 3 Kid, and that was the only one that was somewhat passable to me because he was a little dude. This is a little mold. This is not Ric Flair. This is not Ric Flair at all. He should have been in a better position than this. Just so disappointing. And then they even took one a little worse. They said, how bad can we make this Ric Flair Hasbro? How much worse can we make this? Let's see how we can really dig the knife into old young Kyle. They said, let's give him a terrible head sculpt. Let's give him a crazy old man, eyes up, mouth going head sculpt. I've seen the picture this is based on, but of all the Ric Flair pictures in the world at that time, this is the look you wanted to give Ric Flair on a Hasbro toy for little kids. I just don't understand it at all. It just is one of the most mind-boggling decisions that'll probably be for the rest of my life. I can't think of a worse figure that I was anticipating more that just absolutely let me down. Just so frustrating. And like I said, I'm getting fired up all these years later because what could have been if we could have got something like his Mattel Retro version, which is the best Mattel Retro of all time. If we could have got something like that back then, I just think how my childhood fig feds would have been, the playing days, how great it would have been. And I remember after a short while, I just said, I can't even play with this anymore. This doesn't work for me. And that's when I brought my Galoobs into my Hasbro playing days. It was tough to do, but I made it work. A little smoke and mirrors, and I used that Galoob Ric Flair, where it's not perfect. It was light years beyond better than this guy. So number one for me, the most disappointing wrestling figure of all time, and I'm still hot about it, Nature Boy Ric Flair from the Hasbro line. Like I said, put yours in the comments down below. I'm going to go drink a cold glass of water and maybe take a cold shower. Just I'm so worked up watching this list. This bad memory is all brought up here on the channel today. But Ric Flair, number one, put your list in the comments below. You know where to find me on social media. I'd love to have you guys along for the ride, so check it out. Check out the Patreon, all that kind of stuff. And so until next week, I am Kyle. I'll see you guys all real soon.